Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I am your co-host Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are continuing our mock draft series with Ryan's fourth mock draft. I have already done mine. Go check out that video in the link below. But today we are doing Ryan's mock draft. But before we get into that, if you have not already, hit that subscribe button. Also ring that bell to get notified when we release new content. Ryan and I, we are at 1,122 subscribers. We have a growing community of football fanatics that we are greatly appreciative of. We honestly didn't think that we would be here this quickly. So thank you to everyone that has joined our community. And if you have not joined our community, do it, because we have some really cool guys and gals who are joining our community. So Ryan, I'll quit rambling here. Let's get into your mock draft. This is the fourth one of the 2023 NFL offseason. Yeah. We have one more that will be coming out the week of the NFL draft, and we will be going live Thursday, April 27th for the draft to see how wrong we are. And so feel free to tune in. Ryan, tell us a little bit about the setup of what we're doing, and then let's get started with your first overall pick.
Yeah, so we were using the PFF mock draft simulator tool. Then I'm also doing what I think these teams should do. You approached it a little bit differently and did what you think the teams are going to do.
Yep, that's a good point.
So I'm doing that, and then I think that's about it. Let's get right into it.
So, and you did you mention trades? We're doing trades.
Yes, we are doing trades as well. So I do have a couple pretty early on. So thank you for that note. So starting off, if I was a GM today, hold on, let me make sure I'm fully zoomed in on my screen. There we go. All right. If I were a GM today, I would be looking at that Georgia game that CJ Stroud played, and I would be hot and sweaty because it was absolutely phenomenal. And I think if you had any questions about CJ Stroud coming into this draft, that game answered it for you right there. And he only did it once, so I get there's some concern there, but he really showed some grit. He was able to go through multiple progressions. He was able to ad-lib as plays broke down. He did a fantastic job, and I think that earned him the first overall pick. All right.
Yep. I can't confirm. I was at that game, and I was also hot and sweaty. Not for the reason that you're talking about. It's just because there was a lot of people there. So I agree. In my mock draft, I went a different route because of based off rumors and what I think the team will do. However, though, I agree with you. He showed in that game like what everyone was saying that he needs to do. And to me, it's like he can do it. I think getting in that system, getting in that mindset, being able to run the ball and how accurate he is. I would this route as well if I was a GM.
Yeah. And then Texans at 2, they get the leftovers. Bryce Young, probably the most polished quarterback prospect coming into this draft. He just has the concern of being 5'10" and like 190 pounds. So he goes here. And then at 3, this is actually where I have my first trade. So I have the Las Vegas Raiders trading down. I was actually looking at this, and I was pretty impressed at how little they were going to have to spend. I want to say it was a 1, a 2, and then a 4 for 3. And then I have them getting a 5th back. And so I think that's pretty reasonable, especially when you're investing in a future franchise quarterback. So we're just going to go ahead and make that trade.
Well, I also think too now, because the competition for that 3rd spot is very minimal. If we're being completely honest, I think their main competition would be Tennessee
and the Colts.
And the Colts. That's what they do have to jump the Colts. But the Colts, I think can be, if they're quarterback no matter what, then they're going to get one. Maybe it's not their guy. But then the Titans, they would have to give up multiple first-round picks because that's what the 49ers did a couple years ago for Trey Lance. So I think that the Raiders wouldn't have to give up nearly as much just to go up a few spots.
Yeah. And I think they take Anthony Richardson here. To me, he's QB3, and he has the highest ceiling of all these guys. So I really like that one. I think he has really good potential, and I would like to see what Josh McDaniels could do to help mold him into a future franchise quarterback. So we'll take him here at 3. And then the Indianapolis Colts in this scenario are kind of the ones that get left out, right? I don't really like Will Levis. I'll just put that bluntly. I I think he is a project quarterback. I don't think that Shane Steichen is going to want to put his money on that with the 4th overall pick. And I actually have them going with left tackle Paris Johnson Jr. here at 4. I think Paris Johnson is an underrated prospect. He has elite length. He has really solid athleticism for that position. And he's the most polished, true left tackle, I think, coming into this class. And I think this offensive line needs a little bit of a boost. And I think he's the guy to do it. He comes in at that left tackle spot. They still have Quentin Nelson. And I think they stand pat at 4. They take, in my opinion, one of the best true football players in this class. And then they move on. So at 5, I mentioned this in your mock draft. I'm not as high on Will Anderson as I feel like the majority is. I also think Jalen Carter is going to fall down some boards because of his off-the-field issues, his pro day, and then also his attitude about meeting with teams outside of the top 10. I think that's very off-putting for some teams. So I actually have the Seahawks going with Tyree Wilson here at 5. I think you look at his versatility, his speed to power. Yeah, he might be lacking some pass rush moves, but I think you're getting a day 1 edge and a day 1 starting edge. And I think he has really good developmental traits because he still has room to grow, and he was pretty productive at Texas Tech. So, and then I have the Lions here taking who I also have as my new CB1 off the board, and that is Christian Gonzalez. He's so athletic and big, and just you watch him on tape, and he's one of those guys. You know how like usually when you watch film, they like circle him before the play starts. You don't have to do that with Christian Gonzalez. He's just so freaking big and fast. Like you know exactly where he is. And maybe I'm just drawn to his athletic traits, but I think he actually has some really solid cover skills as well. And I think the Lions get enamored with that as well. So I'm going to take Christian Gonzalez there. Up next is the Arizona Cardinals here at 7. And while I'm not in love with this pick, I just think he's a really high floor edge. Will Anderson out of Alabama is going to be here at 7. They get to trade back, accumulate a few extra picks, and then still get what many consider to be a blue chip prospect in this class. Again, I'm not super thrilled about it, but I like what he brings. He brings to the table. I just think there are other guys in this class that might do other things better than him. So I'm going to take him here. And then this is actually where I have my second trade here in the top 10. So I actually have the Tennessee Titans trading up. It would only really cost them a first and a third, really, to move back or to move up with the Falcons in terms of value. If Will Levis falls, it might be a little bit more. But I'm going to go ahead, do that. And I'm going to have them take Will Levis off the board here. They have a lot of other needs, but I think the first thing that Mike Vrabel is going to want to address is going to be that quarterback position. You kind of mentioned it in your mock draft. They have done a couple things to address that offensive line already, and I think they can add some more solid pieces a little bit later in this class. So I'm going to go with Will Levis here. And then here at 9, I go back and forth on what I actually want the Bears to do here. So Jalen Carter is still on the board, but I really think that they could use Devin Witherspoon. And so I went back and forth on that, and I eventually came out to the fact that they traded back from 1. They have accumulated a lot of picks later on, and I think that they're a team that could really take a chance on a guy like Jalen Carter. And also, I think scheme-wise, Matt Eberflus loves to build his defensive lines from the inside out in terms of pass rush, and I think Jalen Carter just fits that really, really well. And so they're gonna be the team that takes the risk here at 9 on Jalen Carter. All right. At 10, when we did our off-season review of the Philadelphia Eagles, the one big thing that I noticed that they were really missing was that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson safety. And in this class, outside of Brian Branch, there is not another safety that can really come in and play 3 downs day 1. And so it might be a slight reach. But I have Brian Branch going here to the Eagles at 10. He does everything well. You want him to play over the top? All right, great. He does it well. You want him to play too high? All right, he does that well. You want him to play in the box or in the slot over receiver? Fine, he does that well. Plug and play safety, and I think he's a cornerstone of this defense for a very, very long time. So after I've been talking a lot, what do you think so far? My top 10.
It's definitely different. I would say I don't disagree with any of the picks. It makes sense to me that like the Raiders Cardinals trade just would make sense because the Cardinals need so much.
Mm-hmm.
The Raiders can go get the quarterback that they want instead of like maybe hoping for one to be there or getting the fourth best one. So I like that trade. Going with Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson, I can agree going off preference. The one thing, and I'll just say as the Falcons fan, I also then looking at it, I think also strategically for the Titans to trade up. They don't have as many picks. I get why the Falcons would want to trade back.
Yeah.
But if you keep scrolling down, I honestly think who else would be in competition to maybe trade up with Chicago or Philadelphia to go get Will Levis? Like I think the Titans could stay put and then let's say someone does trade up and they want to give a lot for Will Levis, then there's still Jackson Smith and Jigba. There's still Peter Skoronski that looks like he's there at that pick. There's still other need. There's corner as well. There's other edge rushers that I think they can address. So that one trade, I get your reasoning for it, but to me, legitimately, I think the next best team that would trade up for a quarterback might be Tampa Bay. Like I don't think
I think Washington as well.
So I think they're going to roll with Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett. Like I don't think that I don't think you sign Jacoby Brissett for him to be a third string. I mean, maybe Sam Howell could be the third string, but from all reports and from all internal reports, I mean, maybe you go get Will Levis, get competition. But at the same time, I think in this day and age, if you trade up for a quarterback in the first round specifically, you want him to start day one. And I don't know, just from reports, I think the Commanders, I think that they want Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett to duel it out, So they very well could. So that's just the one thing up to this point where I would say it's intriguing and interesting to hear your point of view.
So I think if you look at it, I think Chicago wants to stand pat, and Philadelphia, they have reasons to trade back from 10. However, passing up on a guy like Bryant Branch, I think would be really hard for them. So if Will Levis makes it to 8, I think you will get calls from Washington, Tampa Bay, even probably Seattle at 20 to come in and trade up that far. So I think that there will be some Will Levis movement there. Somebody I think will trade up to draft Will Levis there.
It's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. Yeah, it's just it's interesting, and this is what's the fun part about this season is to hear your train of thoughts on it. And like compared to mine, it would be like, do teams want to give up draft capital for what would be the fourth best quarterback in this draft? You know what I mean? So it's interesting just to kind of go and see. As a Falcons fan, I would say, like, shoot, I was stuck between Witherspoon or Skoronski, and so now we traded back, and then now they're still here. So like, that's perfect. So it's perfect fit.
Yeah, and that's a good transition. So here at 11, I do have the Falcons going with Peter Skoronski. So before Peter Skoronski was All-American left tackle, he was a really solid center and a really solid guard. And I think the Falcons could really use a left guard. And then when Jake Matthews retires, you can kick Skoronski out to left tackle and then try to replace the interior. And so I really like him there. He's a good fit, especially with Desmond Ridder most likely going to start for the Atlanta Falcons. So this is where I actually have another trade. So I'm going to have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another team that is actually rebuilding. But I'm going to have the Buccaneers trade up 19 to 12. I think they only have to give up 82 and then 153. But I'm going to do that. And then this is where Devin Witherspoon comes off the board. They really need some cornerback help down there. They did re-sign Jamel Dean, but they lost Sean Murphy-Bunting. And in this division, I think you look at what these teams are bringing in, and they're going to need some corners to help cover. So, all right.
I like it.
And then this is where I have Broderick Jones coming off the board. He is the most athletic offensive tackle in this class. And the Jets really need offensive linemen. And Broderick Jones, like I've said this before, but he just reminds me of Trent Williams in his size and physicality and athleticism. And I really like what he brings to the table. I think Robert Saleh is going to love him, and I like the fit. So next up, I have another trade here. So I actually have the Jacksonville Jaguars trading all the way up here. 24. Give the Patriots 56 for 14. All right. And then, okay, so this is actually where I'm going to have Joey Porter coming off the board. So Joey Porter is one of the more polarizing cornerbacks in this class. Some people think he's the number 1. Some people think he's the number 5. And I think Jacksonville is going to really, really like him. And they're going to want to get up and take him before anybody else really has a shot at him. So next up, Green Bay. I think they're going to want to go a different route with the tight end position. I'm going to have them draft Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah. I really like him as a receiver, not the best blocker, but I think when you look at what they're going to want to do is I think Green Bay is going to want to spread defenses out and then beat them with speed. You have Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, and now you add Dalton Kincaid, a really athletic tight end, to that mix. And I think it's a really, really solid group for Jordan Love to come in and take care of. So,
no, I just like tight end at this pick.
Yeah.
It's funny that they have QB as there as like as a need. I really don't think that they do. When I think tight end would be more immediate need that would be addressed. I think receivers that they can address in day 2, just like how they've always done. But here, I think they get tight end and him or Michael Mayer. I think I picked Michael Mayer. Either pick for Green Bay, I would really like.
Yeah. So next up is the Washington Commanders. And there's not really a corner that I love on this board left, and especially at 16. So I actually think they're going to bolster up their wide receiver room. And I actually have Quentin Johnson coming off the board because I think if you look at what they have Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, 2 undersized guys. And I think Quentin Johnston would add a really nice size element to this room. So I know it's not one of their major needs, but I think he's one of the best players available so far. And so I'm going to have Quentin Johnston coming off the board there.
I like it.
So at 17, Pittsburgh Steelers are on the clock. To me, this one's pretty easy. I am going with Darnell Wright, the tackle from Tennessee. And I'll just be frank, Darnell Wright is one of the major reasons that I am not as high on Will Anderson as I think the rest of the people are. Because in that game, Darnell Wright absolutely dominated Will Anderson, who is a consensus top 5 pick. And I think what he brings to the table is just really great aggression. He finishes off blocks really well. And I think you get Najee Harris behind him, and teams are going to have a tough time stopping that. So I really like that one there. Next up, Detroit Lions. So this is where I have Michael Mayer coming off the board. I really like Michael Mayer, super versatile tight end. I made this pick because he is just a true 3-down complete tight end. And I think he has a knack for getting over the middle that just you don't see very often. And I think him and Jared Goff are going to form a really solid tight end. They did just trade TJ Hawkinson, so I'll be curious to hear what you think of that. And I think they're very comparable players. However, I think Mayer might be a slightly better separator than Hawkinson was.
So Lions fans absolutely correct me if I'm wrong, but I actually think a better comparison to Hawkinson might actually be Kincaid. Mayer, to me, I think is more of a tight end that will line up next to a tackle. He can line up in the slot, but I mean, they call him Baby Gronk for a reason. And TJ Hawkinson is more receiver-esque and I would say Dalton Kincaid is more receiver-esque as well. So I think Mayer would fit into the system really well, because with them getting David Montgomery, this offensive line is already really good, but then this will only help with run blocking. But also then play action plays now are open. I think now they would become even more lethal in the red zone with how big he is as well. So this is a great pick for the Lions, I would think.
Yeah. So if I remember from watching Hawkinson in Detroit, they lined him up in line a lot, and he was actually pretty successful as that. He's not quite the receiver that Kincaid was, but athletically, I think he's more athletic than Mayer. But the way that Mayer runs routes and the way that he positions himself is just something unique that you don't see. And I really like that pick there. So
I do as well.
So then going on to 19, I kind of went back and forth on this because they do have John Mechie, but I really like Jackson Smith-Njigba here, just because he's another versatile all-around guy that you can line up just about anywhere. He played a lot of slot in college, but he did run a 4.52 at his pro day, so I think that is enough speed on the outside. And as well, he's the most polished guy coming into this class. He's just super smooth. He runs fantastic routes. He paces his routes really, really well, and he's very patient with his timing and breaks and things. So I really like Jackson Smith-Njigba there. Texans double up on offense and get Bryce Young, his new best friend. So here at 20, I have O'Cyrus Torrence coming off the board, and I passed him. It just makes sense. I think you had this in your mock draft, and it's like, okay, like
I agree, and it's interesting too, just because they address the defense. They have to address the defensive line position at number 5 overall. I think you had them taking Tyree Wilson, correct?
Yeah.
So here, I mean, maybe they could go Kalijah Kancey or Brian Breesy, but then that's double dipping on the defensive line. I think receiver-wise, I think value they can get with one of their 2 second-round picks, something similar to now what is available. So they need to address the offensive line position, especially the interior offensive line. So that's why, to me, it's I'm trying to convince myself that I'm not overthinking it and that this is just the pick that makes sense.
Yeah. And so I just the Seahawks, they hit the ball in the fairway on in the draft, and I feel like that is just hitting the ball in the fairway, right? So going on to 21, I was torn on what to do with this pick because there's Zay Flowers left on the board. Deonte Banks is still there. And then I also think that Bijan Robinson, this is one of the teams that they could go. So ultimately, out of all 3 of those options, I made the logical decision and decided to trade back with the Dallas Cowboys. So they get 26, 90, and 21. I'll force that. And then this is where I have Bijan coming off the board. I think there's a couple teams that you look at right now, the Chargers being one that could be on Bijan watch. The Ravens are definitely another. So I just, you said it in your mock draft. I think this is where he ends up. I think Jerry Jones wants him to end up here. And I think if Jerry Jones even gets an inkling that he's going to go in the top 20, he will trade up into the top 20. So I think that is a good fit there. And then as well with the Ravens, I love Nolan Smith, man. I know having him, for loving a guy so much, having him fall all the way to 22, I just haven't had a spot where I really like him. And I think Baltimore is the place. Yeah, I think Baltimore will use him to his fullest potential. He's a great locker room guy. They just lost Calais Campbell, so you're getting a little added bonus there with this pick. But I just cannot get enough of watching Nolan Smith on tape. And then one of the things that I loved was even after he tore his pectoral and was out for the whole season, apparently he was at every practice. He was one of the first players at every practice. He was at every game. He was going through tape and doing whiteboard stuff with players on the sidelines, like just the true locker room leader that I think you really, really want. If he makes it this far at 22, the Baltimore Ravens would be extremely lucky for that.
Yeah.
So,
well, especially too after doing our review, and I didn't realize how much Ravens had lost on the defensive line side of the ball. So they maybe could go receiver. I think that's to get a player like Nolan Smith, as you said, it's too hard to pass out.
Yeah. So here at 23, Minnesota Vikings, they have so many needs. And I didn't really know where to go. And so I just went with Kalijah Kancey, best player on the board. I think he fills a need on that interior that like he's going to be able to help stop the run. He's going to be able to get after the passer. And I think he's going to be a good piece to build around. His Aaron Donald comparison, I think, is a little overhyped, but I think he has top 5 defensive tackle potential in the NFL. So I like that there. Getting that at 23 is really good. I think Brian Flores is really going to like him there. So this is where I have Zay Flowers coming off the board. And to me, I'm extremely nervous about Zay Flowers, right? He's very small. He only ran a 4.42, and he dropped like 21 passes over the last 2 seasons. But you watch him on tape, and he just moves differently. And I think if you can get him in your building, you can get him in a system that allows him to use what he's good at, and that is being a small outside wide receiver who stretches defenses and puts pressure on safeties. I think if you can let him just do that and nothing else, I think he's a really solid receiving option. And I think that's exactly what New England needs right now. They need some speed on the outside that's really going to stretch defenses. So I like Zay Flowers there. New York Giants, I'm going to do the same thing you did. Jordan Addison, Stephon Diggs Jr. It's one of those, we talked about this with the Seahawks, but it's just one of those fits that you look at and you're like, yeah, that just works. So,
yeah.
So next, to me, the Chargers are one of the teams. They made that trade back. They kind of get left hanging. But one of the guys that I absolutely love in this class is Will McDonald. And what he was able to do at the Senior Bowl was really put his name on the map. And he showed he has a knack for getting around tackles and being a solid edge rusher. But what he didn't show at the Senior Bowl is the fact that he played all over the defense. He took snaps at cornerback last year, and then he played in the middle, and then he played at the edge. He even played like 3 snaps at like nose tackle, and which is just insane for a guy. It was in the Big 12, so like nose tackle like is about 40 pounds lighter than any other conference. So there is a competition gap there, and then he was only mildly productive. But I think what you see in his versatility, I think, is something that the Chargers would really, really like. So, all right, I'm probably going to get the most hate for this pick specifically, but I have the Bills trading back with the Indianapolis Colts. So give up 35, 79, and then I think 162 for 27. The Bills need a few more picks. The Colts have some picks to spare, not a ton, but I said earlier, Shane Steichen probably not going to want to hitch his wagon to Will Levis. Well, there's a guy that I really liked, and then he tore his ACL. And
that trade didn't go through.
Oh, it didn't? Oh.
Yeah.
But there's a guy I really liked, and then he tore his ACL. And then he kind of plummeted down draft boards because he's an older guy, doesn't have maybe the most complex offense that he's in. But when you watch him, to me, if you compare him to previous quarterbacks, I think he's a better prospect than Jalen Hurts was coming out. I definitely like him a little bit more than Kenny Pickett last year. And Kenny Pickett was 20th overall. And so Hendon Hooker is going to be the 2023 quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. That's probably the boldest take I've had on this channel. But I watch him. He's always looking in the right spot. Granted, he did run a simple offense, and he was throwing to 2 NFL wide receivers. But shoot, like if you're going to take a risk on a quarterback, I think Hendon Hooker is the prime prospect for that. So
I don't disagree with the Colts taking him. Where I disagree and is them trading up for him. And this goes back to kind of what I was talking about with Tennessee. And I like the boldness of it, and obviously it's the mock draft, but just my 2 cents for it is between this pick and then when the Colts pick again, who would draft a quarterback here?
So it's not just that, but it's also who would trade up in front of the Colts to take Hendon Hooker. So I think you look at, I think the Falcons are actually in that realm. They might trade up and take a Hendon Hooker. I think you look at Arizona, they're also in that realm. Detroit also in that realm, because he's with his torn ACL, he's probably going to start the season on the PUP list. So you're looking at a developmental guy who could come in and potentially start for you second half of the season or next season as a whole. And I think that there are teams that will give that up to move up into the top of the second round to do that. So that's my reasoning for them trading up. Also, since you are having that developmental year, you do get the 5th year option on him as well.
Okay, and that's a good point.
So, all right. Next up is the Cincinnati Bengals. Deonte Banks falls right in their lap because there was a little bit of chaos there. And I think they are running to the podium for this one. Deonte Banks is my lowest graded first round corner, but he has some really good reps on tape. But he also has some really bad ones. So he has some reps where he stonewalls wide receivers at the line of scrimmage, like doesn't even let them off the line in press coverage. But then he also has ones where wide receivers try to get off of it and then he just throws them to the ground and gets a penalty. And so like, I think there's a balance that he needs to strike with his physicality. And I think Cincinnati is the place for him. So, all right. Next up, I think the Saints are also running to the podium for this one. I don't really like Lucas Van Ness that much. He was really only on the field in true pass rushing snaps. And I think when you watch him on tape, he was put in a lot of one-on-one situations because he only really played in a lot of true pass rushing snaps. Not saying he didn't play against the run. I'm just saying he was kind of handpicked for pass rushing snaps. And he is a really solid pass rusher. However, a lot of people are going to reference the fact that he had a really good game against Peter Skoronski. Well, all he did was bull rush Peter Skoronski. And Peter Skoronski does not have the length to truly handle a bull rush. And I think when he faces other left tackles who have the ability to handle his bull rush, he has nothing else to really go to. So I think he falls down here to 29. I still like him as a prospect, but just not enough to really take him much higher. So, and then Eagles here. This is another one that I've done before, but and gotten a little bit of hate for. John Michael Schmitz was the highest rated offensive lineman at the Senior Bowl, and that included Osiris Torrance, who we both had take at 21. And so I think getting him here at 30, he can play guard for the time being, but then when Jason Kelce retires, you can kick him over into center, and then you have another Pro Bowl caliber center. So, and then also to wrap up my mock draft, DeJuan Jones going to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think this is on par with like the Osiris Torrance of the Seahawks. It just makes sense, right? They lost Orlando Brown. They signed Jawan Taylor to be a left tackle. And they lost Andrew Wiley, the right tackle. So they're going to take the best right tackle available, and that is DeJuan Jones. So yeah. So that was my mock draft 4.0. I think it's a little bit different than what a lot of people are putting up right now, but I really like it. I think it makes a lot of sense, at least to me. And so yeah. What are your overall thoughts on it?
So it's funny looking at definitely is different than I think what a lot of the other stuff is going on right now. But that being said, though, come draft night, anything can happen. So it could absolutely this could absolutely be the case where the Colts would trade up and take Hendon Hooker. Fair point about them getting a 5th year option. Still, maybe they will let them fall. But I bring that up specifically just because then they do get Paris Johnson Jr. at number 4. And so it's definitely very interesting. Overall, it's like when compared mine to yours, it's like the same group of players kept going in about the same spot. Just maybe they had a different order, or maybe we had different reasoning why this team took them and passed on a different player or vice versa. So it just goes back to being said, even where it's like in our mock draft, like our top 2 quarterbacks were different. I think just goes to show how random this whole draft class will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then, so like going from your mock draft to mine, I still liked, we had Tyree Wilson and Christian Gonzalez going in the same spot. And then we actually had DeJuan Jones going in the same spot. And then a few guys that went to the same team, but in different spots was Peter Skoronski and then Bijan Robinson as well. So, and then for the Packers and Lions, we just flipped tight ends. So like there's a lot of similarities. I just think we have a different approach to how we see it. So,
oh yeah, well, and I had significantly less trades because I went through of like what value and also overall player talent that was available at each position, and it did kind of fit. We're seeing teams now make trades, I think, and we can kind of see like based off their evaluation on who we think they're going to take in the draft. For example, Lions traded Jeff Okudah today. They signed Cameron Sutton and another CJ Gardner-Johnson in the offseason. And then to me, they're getting rid of Jeff Okudah because I think then they could come in and get another young rookie corner, just like how they did with Jeff Okudah, which then I think that clears up that space for them to make this pick. So I think based off the information, maybe we can kind of decipher what these teams are going to do with situations like that, you know?
Yeah. And so maybe I took Paris Johnson a little too high, but I'm just not a fan of Will Levis. If I were doing what the Colts would actually do, I probably would take Will Levis there because they sent like almost the entire organization to Will Levis's pro day. Like they had scouts, GMs, like even like lower level people. Granted, it's like a 3-hour drive from downtown Indy. So
yeah. Well, I even think I heard like then in comparison, like CJ Stroud's, it's like I don't think they sent anybody. Maybe they sent one scout. Or it was either them or somebody else. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was the Raiders. But like they sent one scout because there's no point. They know that he is not going to be there by the time the 4th pick. And same thing with Bryce Young as well. So I could honestly actually see them maybe going Will Levis only just because if you look at Shane Steichen's offense and that he ran with Jalen Hurts and having a big physical quarterback like that, yes, he needs some development in the passing game, but run-wise, though, he's not afraid to run the ball. Neither is Jalen Hurts. He's not afraid to run right behind the offensive line and then get hit by these defensive linemen. Yeah. I think Levis can put on a hit. So I think that they could still go Levis there, but I can also see them going Paris Johnson Jr. and then just sticking it out with was it Sam Eilinger? Is that their quarterback as of today?
They signed Gardner Minshew.
They did sign Gardner Minshew. Sign Gardner Minshew. Yes, I forgot about that.
So yeah, but anyways, let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this mock draft here. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of this mock draft, and go ahead and like and subscribe and smash that bell so you can get notified when Tyler and I create new content. And other than that, we will see you guys next time.